Hello, so gold and the yen have been flying recently on the back of a quite dovish Fed and a BOJ which is reluctant on further easing. So let's move in straight into the chart with this weekly chart of gold or the perspective over the next few quarters. It is in a bull trend. It is not a full-fledged bull market yet. It is still a corrective up move labeled in gray here. Nevertheless, it still has a few more months to go and possibly could add another 100 points and still remain a correction. Moving on to the daily chart or the perspective over the next few months, we are in an impulsive uptrend in green. The potential, we've reached the lower end around 1300 and we could possibly make it up above 1350 to possibly 1370. The risk index is still quite in the middle of the range and still moving up. It is not yet in the overbought zone. The hourly chart, or the perspective over the next few weeks, is seeing a bit of short-term exaggeration. Yet, you still have the potential to move up into the 1320s over the next few weeks. The risk index, again, is not overbought yet, so this move is not quite finished yet. To summarize it, we look at the investor's view, or the combination of the weekly, daily and hourly chart. At the moment, we have three bulls, so a potential continuation uptrend. There's still potential on the hourly, still potential on the daily, and still corrective potential on the weekly. Moving on to the yen, dollar yen, which has seen quite a strong sell-off since the last three quarters. Well, it is also in a bear trend, but it is still corrective. You can see the gray zone. Now we enter this gray zone and our support is going to be just below it, or just below 10434, which means that as long as we keep above 10434, this is still deemed a correction and we could still move back up towards the second half of the year. Moving on to the daily, or the perspective over the next few months, we're in an impulsive down. We pretty much reached the targets here, as you can see, yet the risk index is not quite oversold. So you could expect a bit more work around here before we can create a bottom. So don't fight the trend at the moment, it's a continuation, it's not quite over yet. On the hourly, you could see that potential down to test the 10440 level, pretty much the level we mentioned previously. There's still a bit more time left, a week or so, and at the moment, the risk index is not oversold yet. To summarize it, three bears, still a bit of potential here on the hourly, pretty much done on the daily, and getting into our corrective targets, a level of support on the weekly. Moving on to euro dollar. This is the weekly chart of euro dollar, or the perspective over the next few quarters. It is in a bull, and similarly to what we saw on gold, it's only a corrective bull. There's not much time left here to finish off this move, but there's still potential up to perhaps the 117, perhaps a bit more over the next few quarters, or possibly more next few months, as we're almost done with this timing. The risk index is bouncing off oversold, but it's not really in an uptrend yet. The daily is still quite bullish, making it up to 117 over the next few months. And the risk index here is also in the middle of the range, so there's a bit more to go. So it does seem like, although we're only in a long-term correction, or we believe we still are in a long-term correction, there's still a bit more to go in this correction over the next few months. On the hourly, similarly to gold, we've seen that there's more potential, possibly up to 115, possibly up to 116 over the next few weeks. We're getting into some sense of exaggeration here with our envelopes touching each other and the risk index in the overbought. So over the course of this week, we could see a slight correction. So three bulls, potential continuous uptrend, a bit more potential on all these charts, and bear in mind that we're still only corrective on the weekly. Moving on to the S&P 500, we've been in a consolidation down on this weekly chart since the second quarter last year. This consolidation down is not quite finished yet, it seems, and we could still move lower to retest the previous lows that we did earlier this year. The target here is around 1864 to 1707, which means that as long as we don't make it below the 1707, this would still be deemed a correction and we could still be moving back up towards the second half of the year. Now we've had a great bounce and it seems like it's slowly turning down, so we could see a period of retracement over the coming weeks, months. And we'll have a better look at it. Here we can see that the daily is still very strong, possibly above 2200 to 2325, but we can see the prices have corrected a bit over the last few weeks. Now we don't expect this move to be linear, so some sense of correction here could be in the making over the next few weeks. Now over the longer term, it still seems that the risk index has some way to go over the next few months. So let's look at this retracement on the hourly chart, and we've just made it below our corrective target, opening the way possibly to levels in the low 2000s. Now we just made it slightly below this corrective target, so it would probably need to be reconfirmed over the next few days, but the risk index still has some way to go down, so it's possible that this consolidation could continue. So at the moment, we're in a correction on the weekly. We're still in an uptrend on a daily, and it still has potential over the next few months, but we're retracing on the hourly. So that's a potential resume downtrend in a pullback period. That's all for today. Thank you very much.